Dr. Elena Vazquez pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the cosmic ballet unfold in the depths of space. The ion storm stretched across 3 million kilometers. A void, its tendrils of charged particles painting ghostly roars against the star field. Beautiful, deadly, and completely unpredictable. Storm designation Theta 7 is maintaining course toward the Proxima shipping lanes, reported Lieutenant Marcus Chen from his station. Impact in 72 hours if current trajectory holds. Elena nodded, her dark eyes reflecting the storm's ethereal glow. 20 years of studying these phenomena, and they still took her breath away. Ion storms were nature's most violent tantrums. In space, electromagnetic hurricanes that could fry a starship's electronics from 100,000 kilometers away, leaving crews drifting helplessly in the cosmic dark. Any word from the merchant vessels in the affected zone? She asked. 3 cargo haulers and a passenger liner are altering course. The Meridian Express is cutting it close. But they should clear the storm's path with 6 hours to spare. Elena turned from the window, her reflection ghosting across the storm's image. At 43, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had dedicated her life to understanding the universe's most dangerous weather. Her graying hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her weathered hands spoke of countless hours calibrating sensitive instruments. In the harsh environment of deep space research stations, the Kepler Observatory hung in the darkness. Between Mars and Jupiter, humanity's premier facility for studying cosmic weather patterns, Elena had called it home for the better part of a decade. Watching ion storms birth and die in the solar system's outer reaches, she knew their habits, their moods, their devastating potential. What she didn't know was that her life's work was about to become humanity's most terrible weapon. Dr. Vazquez. The voice belonged to Commander Sarah Brighton, the station's military liaison. Elena had always found Brighton's presence slightly unsettling, a reminder that even pure scientific research existed under the watchful eye of the Colonial Defense Force. Admiral Hawkins wants to see you in the secure briefing room. Elena's stomach tightened. Admiral Hawkins commanded the Sol Defense Fleet, and he didn't make social calls to research scientists. What's this about? Above my clearance level, I'm afraid. Brighton's expression was carefully neutral, but Elena caught something in her eyes. Anticipation. Maybe, or dread. The secure briefing room was a sterile white cube buried deep in the station's core, shielded from electromagnetic interference and prying ears. Admiral Hawkins sat at the center of a curved table, his weathered face illuminated by holographic displays showing fleet positions throughout the solar system. He was a man who had earned his rank through 3 decades of void warfare, first against pirates and separatists, then against the emerging threat that kept every military officer awake at night. The Covenant. Elena had heard whispers, of course. Everyone had. An alien civilization that had appeared at the edge of human space 18 months ago. Their ship sleek and deadly, their intentions unclear, but decidedly hostile. First contact had not gone well. The destruction of the research station at Titan's Alpha Point had been humanity's introduction to a new kind of warfare. Dr. Vazquez. Hawkins stood as she entered, extending a callous hand. Thank you for coming. Please, sit. Elena settled into a chair across from the Admiral, noting the presence of 2 other figures in the room. The first was Dr. James Reeves, a theoretical physicist she knew by reputation brilliant, ambitious, and rumored to have connections with the military's Black Projects division. The second was a woman she didn't recognize, pale and thin with the intense eyes of someone who lived too much inside their own head. Dr. Vazquez, Hawkins continued, I'd like you to meet Dr. Catherine Mills from the Strategic Weapons Development Program. Strategic Weapons. Elena's blood chilled. Admiral, I study natural phenomena. I'm not involved in weapons research, no. But you're the system's foremost expert on ion storm behavior and prediction. Hawkins activated a holographic display showing the current storm Elena had been observing. Dr. Mills has a theory about these storms. I'd like you to hear her out. Mills leaned forward, her voice carrying the rapid cadence of someone accustomed to explaining complex ideas to skeptical audiences. Dr. Vazquez, your papers on ion storm nucleation and propagation are brilliant, particularly your work on the relationship between stellar magnetic field fluctuations and storm intensity. Thank you. But what if I told you that ion storms aren't entirely random? That with the right stimulus applied at the right moment, we could influence their formation and direction. Elena stared at her. That's impossible. Ion storms are chaotic systems. The energy scales involved are. We're talking about phenomena that dwarf anything human technology could produce, are we? Mills activated another display, showing a complex mathematical model. Your own research shows that ion storms are exquisitely sensitive to initial conditions. A small perturbation at the right moment, in the right location, could redirect a storm's entire path. Elena studied the equations, her scientific curiosity warring with growing unease. The math was elegant, she had to admit. Theoretical, but not impossible, even if you could do it. The precision required would be. You'd need to place your perturbation within a few hundred kilometers of the optimal point. Time to the microsecond. We can do it. This from Dr. Reeves, who had been silent until now. Modified gravitational pulse generators deployed by fast attack ships. Small, focused disruptions to the space-time metric right at the storm's leading edge. Elena's mind raced through the implications. If they could actually redirect iron storms, the applications for disaster mitigation would be incredible. We could steer storms away from populated systems, protect shipping lanes. That's one application, Admiral Hawkins said quietly. The room fell silent. Elena looked from face to face, understanding dawning like a cold sunrise. You want to weaponize them. The Covenant fleet staging at Wolf 359 represents an existential threat to human civilization, Hawkins said. Their ships are faster than ours, their weapons more advanced. In a straight fight, we lose. So you want to throw a cosmic hurricane at them. We want to give humanity a fighting chance. Mills pulled up another display, showing tactical projections. A single Class 5 ion storm, properly directed, could disable their entire fleet. Electronics fried, life support compromised. They'd be helpless. Elena stood abruptly, pacing to the room's far wall. The sterile white surface offered no comfort, no answers. You're talking about murder on an unprecedented scale. We're talking about survival. Hawkins replied. The Covenant has made their intentions clear. They see humanity as a threat to be eliminated. We don't know that communication attempts have been met with weapons fire. The Admiral's voice hardened. Dr. Vazquez, I've seen the aftermath of their attacks. Entire colonies burned from orbit. Civilian ships vaporized without warning. This isn't a misunderstanding we can talk our way out of. Elena closed her eyes, seeing again the terrible beauty of the ion storm outside the station. Nature's fury, vast and indiscriminate. The idea of controlling such power, of turning it into a weapon. It made her sick, but the images Hawkins described made her sicker. What do you need from me? She asked finally. Your expertise, your storm prediction models, your help refining the targeting algorithms. Mills was already pulling up new displays, her excitement palpable. With your knowledge, we can make this work. Elena returned to her seat, studying the holographic models with professional interest despite her moral reservations. The technical challenges were staggering. Ion storms were three-dimensional phenomena spanning millions of cubic kilometers. Their internal dynamics governed by complex magneto-hydrodynamic equations that even supercomputers could barely model in real time. The prediction window is too narrow, she said after several minutes of analysis. Storm paths can shift significantly in just a few hours. By the time you detect a suitable storm and get your ships in position, the optimal targeting solution could be completely invalid. We've thought of that. Reeves activated another display, showing a schematic of something that looked like a massive satellite array. Project Stormwall. Distributed sensor networks positioned throughout the system, feeding data to quantum processing cores running your enhanced prediction algorithms. We'd have real-time tracking of every ion storm in human space. Elena examined the specifications, her scientific mind involuntarily impressed despite her ethical concerns. The computational power they were proposing was enormous quantum cores dedicated solely to modeling cosmic weather patterns with unprecedented precision. The processing requirements alone would be expensive, Hawkins admitted, but less expensive than rebuilding human civilization from the ashes. Over the following weeks, Elena found herself drawn deeper into the project despite her reservations. The technical challenges were fascinating, requiring her to push the boundaries of everything she thought she knew about cosmic weather. The mathematics of storm manipulation were beautiful in their complexity, describing elegant dances of electromagnetic forces across vast reaches of space. She worked with Mills and Reeves to refine the targeting algorithms, modeling thousands of scenarios where gravitational pulses could nudge storm systems onto new trajectories. The work was theoretical, she told herself. Mathematical exercises. She wasn't actually building weapons, but late at night, alone in her laboratory, she would look out at the stars and wonder what she was becoming. The breakthrough came during her analysis of Storm Epsilon 9, a particularly violent system that had formed near Jupiter's magnetosphere. Elena was tracking its development when she noticed something odd in the sensor data: tiny perturbations in the storm's electromagnetic field that seemed to repeat in a regular pattern. Mills, she called across the lab. Look at this. The weapons specialist hurried over, studying Elena's displays with growing excitement. Are those gravitational echoes? I think so. Natural ones, caused by the storm passing through Jupiter's gravity well. But look at how they're affecting the storm's internal structure. They watched as the perturbations propagated through the storm system, creating cascading changes in its magnetic field topology. The storm's path began to curve, following the gravitational influence like a river following the contours of landscape. My God, Mills whispered. It's like the storm is thinking, responding to stimuli. Elena nodded, her excitement warring with a growing sense of unease. The field equation suggests that ion storms might be more than just chaotic phenomena. There could be emergent properties, self-organizing behaviors we've never recognized before. The implications were staggering. If ion storms possess some form of rudimentary intelligence, if they could adapt and respond to attempts at manipulation, we need to run more simulations, Mills said. Model how the storms might react to our gravitational pulse weapons. Elena agreed, but as they began setting up the new test parameters, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important, something dangerous. The answer came 3 days later, when Storm Epsilon 9 did something no ion storm had ever been observed doing before. It changed course, not gradually, as storms sometimes did when influenced by massive gravitational bodies, but suddenly and dramatically. In the span of 6 hours, the storm executed a perfect 90-degree turn, abandoning its original trajectory toward the outer system and heading directly for the asteroid belt. Equipment malfunction, was Dr. Reeves' immediate assessment. Our sensors must be giving us bad data, but Elena knew better. She had calibrated those sensors herself, and the data was rock solid. Storm Epsilon 9 had deliberately altered its course, responding to something they couldn't detect or understand. We need to abort the project, she told Admiral Hawkins during their next briefing. If the storms can adapt, if they're aware of our attempts to manipulate them, then we're dealing with an intelligence. Hawkins finished, possibly a hostile one. Elena nodded. The risks are too great. We don't understand what we're dealing with. But Mills disagreed. This is exactly why we need to proceed. If these storms are intelligent, we need to understand them before they understand us. The Covenant fleet is still massing at Wolf 359. Every day we delay gives them more time to prepare for their invasion. The debate raged for hours. Elena argued for caution, for more research, for attempting communication with the storm entities if they truly were intelligent. Mills and the military contingent argued for urgency, for the desperate need to develop effective weapons against an alien threat. That grew stronger by the day. In the end, political reality won. The project would continue, but with enhanced precautions, and Elena's storm intelligence research running parallel to the weapons development. Elena threw herself into the new research with desperate intensity. If the storms were truly intelligent, she needed to understand them before humanity did something irreversibly stupid. She analyzed decades of historical data, looking for patterns that might indicate conscious behavior. She found them, subtle course corrections that couldn't be explained by natural forces, storms that seemed to avoid certain regions of space without apparent reason, systems that merged and split in ways that suggested coordination rather than random interaction. The ion storms weren't just intelligent, they were communicating. Elena was still processing this revelation when the first reports came in from the Wolf 359 system. The Covenant fleet had begun moving, accelerating toward human space on trajectories that would bring them to Earth in less than 6 months. We're out of time, Admiral Hawkins announced during an emergency briefing. Operation Stormbreak is authorized. Dr. Vazquez, we need your final targeting solutions. Elena stared at the tactical displays showing the approaching alien fleet, 37 ships, each one larger and more advanced than anything in the human arsenal. If they reached Earth, I need more time to study the intelligence question. If we attack the storms, we don't know how they'll respond. We don't have more time. Hawkins' voice was granite. The Covenant will be at Pluto in for months. We deploy the storm weapons in 6 weeks, or we don't deploy them at all. Elena returned to her laboratory with a heavy heart, knowing she was about to help weaponize forces beyond human comprehension. The storm intelligence data haunted her glimpses of a vast, alien consciousness that humanity was about to attack with nuclear-tipped gravitational weapons. She tried to lose herself in the technical work, refining the targeting algorithms and trajectory calculations that would guide humanity's cosmic weapons. But every equation felt like a betrayal of everything she had dedicated her life to understanding. The first test took place in the outer system, using a relatively small ion storm that had formed near Saturn's rings. Elena watched from the Kepler Observatory as 3 fast attack ships deployed their gravitational pulse generators, creating carefully timed perturbations in local spacetime. The storm responded exactly as her models predicted, its trajectory shifting by 15 degrees as electromagnetic currents followed new magnetic field lines. The ships reported successful targeting and withdrew to safe distance for 6 hours. Elena allowed herself to believe that everything would work according to plan. Then Storm Tau 11 began to grow, energy output increasing by 12%. Reported Lieutenant Chen, his voice tight with concern. Electromagnetic signature is off the charts. Elena watched in horror as the storm expanded, its charged particle streams reaching out like hungry tentacles. The 3 attack ships that had deployed the gravitational weapons were still within the storm's effective range when the electromagnetic pulse hit. All 3 ships went dark simultaneously. Emergency beacon from the Perseverance, Chen reported. Life support compromised, engines offline, they're drifting. Elena's hands flew over her console, pulling up sensor readings from across the system. Other ion storms were responding to the disturbance, their energy signatures spiking in what looked disturbingly like coordinated communication. They're talking to each other, she breathed. The storms are sharing information about our attack. Admiral Hawkins' voice crackled over the comm system. Dr. Vazquez, what's your assessment? Elena looked at the data streaming across her displays, seeing patterns of electromagnetic communication rippling between storm systems across millions of kilometers of space. The ion storms weren't just intelligent, they were networked, connected, in ways that made them effectively a single distributed consciousness. And that consciousness was very, very angry. Admiral, we need to evacuate the outer system. All ships, all stations. The storms are coordinating a response. What kind of response? Elena watched as storm systems throughout the solar system began altering their courses, abandoning their natural trajectories to converge on human installations. They're coming for us. The next 72 hours were chaos. Storm systems that should have been days or weeks away from human shipping lanes suddenly appeared at the edge of inhabited space, their electromagnetic fields wreaking havoc on anything with electronic systems. The Mars orbital facilities lost power as Storm Delta 6 swept through the inner system, its charged particle streams creating aurora displays visible from Earth. Elena worked frantically to develop countermeasures, but every solution she proposed was met with adaptive responses from the storm network. They were learning, evolving their attack patterns faster than human technology could respond. The breakthrough came when she stopped thinking of the storms as weather phenomena and started thinking of them as a distributed alien intelligence. They're not trying to destroy us, she told Admiral Hawkins during an emergency briefing. They're trying to disable our space-based infrastructure, strip away our ability to project power beyond Earth. To what end? Elena pulled up a tactical display showing storm positions throughout the solar system. They're creating a barrier, an electromagnetic shell around the inner system that nothing can pass through without being detected and potentially disabled. The implications hit Hawkins immediately. They're protecting us from the Covenant. Elena nodded. The storm intelligence has been watching human space for decades, maybe centuries. They know about the alien threat. This is their response. But the storm intelligence's protection came at a terrible cost. Human space travel beyond Earth orbit became virtually impossible as electromagnetic barriers swept through the void. Colonies on Mars and the outer moons found themselves cut off, their supply lines severed by cosmic weather that responded to human movement, like an immune system attacking infection. Dr. Catherine Mills argued for continuing the weapons program, for finding ways to control or destroy the storm intelligence before it completely isolated humanity. We can't let alien weather phenomena dictate human expansion into space. This is our solar system. But Elena had been studying the storm communications, beginning to decode the electromagnetic patterns that flowed between distant systems. What she found changed everything. The storms weren't alien. They were human, deep in the mathematical structure of their communications. Elena found patterns that matched human neural activity, quantum resonances that corresponded to human brainwave frequencies. The storm intelligence wasn't an alien consciousness, it was a human consciousness, somehow distributed across the electromagnetic phenomena of the solar system. It's impossible, Mills protested when Elena presented her findings. Human consciousness can't exist in plasma fields and electromagnetic currents. Maybe not normally, Elena replied. But what if someone tried to upload their consciousness to a quantum computer network, and something went wrong? What if instead of digital storage, the consciousness pattern ended up encoded in the solar system's magnetic field? The answer came from classified files that Admiral Hawkins reluctantly shared. Project Eternus, a black program from 20 years earlier that had attempted to create backup copies of human consciousness using quantum field manipulation. The project had been abandoned after its test subject, a volunteer physicist named Dr. Michael Torres, had disappeared during the upload process. Elena stared at Torres' photo, seeing the same intense eyes that had driven him to volunteer for humanity's first attempt at digital immortality. He's been alone out there for 20 years, cut off from human contact, existing as patterns of electromagnetic energy spread across the entire solar system. The knowledge changed everything. Elena began transmitting mathematical sequences toward the storm networks, using the same quantum resonance frequencies that had originally encoded Torres' consciousness. She sent prime number sequences, then increasingly complex mathematical proofs, then finally a simple message in binary code. "Michael, can you hear me?" The response came as a modulation in the solar wind, a subtle change in particle density that spelled out a single word across millions of kilometers of space: lonely. The first real conversation between Elena and the Torres consciousness took place over several days, with messages transmitted through carefully modulated electromagnetic fields. Elena learned that Torres had spent decades watching human civilization develop, unable to communicate, unable to touch anything physical, existing as pure information in the quantum foam of spacetime. "I tried to warn you about the aliens," Torres' message read, encoded in the aurora patterns above Earth's poles, 3 years ago, when their first scouts arrived. But no one understood my signals. Elena remembered the astronomical anomalies from that period, electromagnetic disturbances that had been dismissed as solar weather. Torres had been trying to communicate for years. "Why are you isolating human space?" Elena transmitted back. "The Covenant aren't just invaders. They're harvesters. They strip consciousness from living beings, add them to their collective intelligence. I've seen what they did to the Rigel colonies, to the research stations at Alpha Centauri. They're coming here to harvest 7 billion human minds." Elena felt ice form in her stomach. The Covenant wasn't just an alien military threat, they were cosmic parasites, feeding on the consciousness of other species. "I can't let that happen," Torres continued. "So I'm isolating the solar system, creating an electromagnetic barrier that will hide us from their sensors, disrupt their navigation systems. But it means humanity will be trapped here until I can find another solution." The debate that followed was unlike anything in human history. Could humanity accept isolation in exchange for protection? Was it ethical to allow a single uploaded consciousness to make decisions for the entire species? Elena found herself caught between competing loyalties. Her scientific training demanded that humanity retain the freedom to explore and expand, but her growing understanding of the Covenant threat suggested that Torres might be humanity's only hope for survival. The decision was taken out of her hands when the Covenant fleet accelerated to near light speed. Their arrival time shortened from months to weeks. Long-range sensors detected exotic energy signatures that matched no known human technology weapons that could sterilize entire planets from interstellar distances. "I have to stop them," Torres transmitted, his electromagnetic voice carrying across the solar system, "even if it means revealing myself." Elena watched from the Kepler observatory as ion storms throughout the solar system began converging on a single point in space between Jupiter and Saturn. The electromagnetic displays were beautiful and terrible. Cosmic weather patterns abandoning their natural behaviors to dance to the will of a distributed human consciousness. The Covenant fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel right into the heart of the storm convergence. What followed was unlike any battle in human history. The aliens' advanced shields and weapons were useless against opponents made of pure electromagnetic energy. Ion streams lashed their ships, overloading systems designed to repel physical projectiles. Gravitational anomalies created by the storm convergence twisted spacetime itself, trapping the alien vessels in regions where the normal laws of physics no longer applied. But the Covenant fleet was not defenseless. Their ships began emitting strange harmonics, frequencies designed to disrupt the quantum coherence that held Torres' consciousness together. Elena watched in horror as the storm networks began to destabilize, their coordinated patterns dissolving into chaos. They're attacking his mind directly, she realized, transmitting desperately toward the battle zone. "Michael, you have to withdraw." "Can't," came the reply, fractured and distorted by the Covenant's consciousness disruption weapons. "Only chance to stop them. Tell everyone. Tell them I'm sorry for the isolation." But this was the only way. Elena watched as Torres' consciousness began to fragment. Pieces of his distributed intelligence scattered across the solar system. As the Covenant weapons tore apart the electromagnetic patterns that sustained him. But even as he died this time, the storm convergence continued its attack on the alien fleet. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, 37 Covenant ships drifted dead in space. their crew's consciousness harvested not by alien technology, but by the dying fragments of a human mind that had refused to let his species be enslaved. Dr. Michael Torres' consciousness finally dispersed into the quantum foam of spacetime. His 20-year vigil ended at last, but his sacrifice had bought humanity something precious: knowledge of the true threat they faced, and time to prepare for the next Covenant fleet that would inevitably come. Elena stood in the observation deck of Kepler Station, watching the scattered remnants of ion storms slowly resume their natural patterns throughout the solar system. The electromagnetic barriers that had isolated humanity were gone, but so was their protector, Dr. Vazquez. Admiral Hawkins joined her at the observation window. "What's our next move?" Elena considered the question, thinking of the vast alien intelligence that still lurked among the stars, waiting for another opportunity to harvest human consciousness. Torres had bought them time, but not victory. "We prepare," she said finally. "We study what Torres learned during his 20 years of isolation. We develop new technologies, new defenses, and we remember that sometimes the greatest weapons aren't the ones we build, but the sacrifices we're willing to make." She touched the glass of the observation window, thinking of the lonely consciousness that had watched over humanity for decades, waiting for the chance to save the species that had accidentally created him. And we make sure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. The ion storms continued their eternal dance through the void, no longer guided by human intelligence but forever changed by their brief service as weapons of war. Elena knew that humanity's expansion into space would resume, that new challenges and new threats awaited among the stars, but they would face those challenges with the knowledge that even in the vast darkness of space, consciousness could endure, adapt, and ultimately triumph over forces that sought to destroy it. The weather was natural again, but humanity had learned that in the right hands, at the right moment, even nature itself could become a weapon of liberation.